difficulties, but we're really excited to get started with you all today. So my name is Lindsay. I am a college counselor here at MoonPrep. And I previously worked as an SAT, ACT tutor. I've been a writer, and I've been with the company now for several years. And I've spent a lot of time working with students who are in the same boat as you, helping them with applications, resume building. So we are here to answer any question you might have, but we're really excited to kind of bring our perspectives to you today. But I'll let Kevin introduce him first as well.
Sure. Thanks, Lindsay. My name's Kevin. I'm also a college counselor here at MoonPrep. My background is in college admissions. I was a former UC Berkeley admissions counselor. I also have about 5 years or so of experience in college admissions consulting and a couple of years doing job placements for young people with disabilities at a local nonprofit in Iowa. So, that's my background, and I'm passionate about helping young people like yourselves with your college journey, and looking forward to answering any questions you may have.
Yeah, perfect. So a little bit about our company before we get to the good stuff, which are all the questions. But essentially, we spend a lot of time now here working with students virtually and guiding them not only through the college admissions process, but also high school. And so here at MoonPrep, all the counselors serve as a guide and mentor to our students. And so we help students select the right classes for their prepare for their major, help them narrow down their career interest to even choose a major, and even find a summer research opportunity or internship or, summer or shadowing experience, whatever it might be. Because we want to help you build the strongest possible applicant profile. So whenever senior year rolls around, you'll be a competitive candidate for even the most selective universities or selective programs, like BSMD. And so if you are a senior right now, we can help guide you through the college application process so absolutely nothing is missed. We'll help you brainstorm the perfect college essays based on, the hundreds of effective ones we've seen. We'll be with every single student, on a one-to-one capacity. We don't follow the typical 9 to 5, Monday through Friday schedule, as you can tell, because we're here. We're working nights, we're working weekends, and we're in all different time zones in a variety of different countries even, because we want to be here when it's convenient for the student. And we'll essentially fill in the gap that might arise from like a busy high school counselor, one who doesn't have time to deal with all these little questions you might have. So anything that has popped up as you're preparing for college applications, whether you're a freshman, a senior, no matter where you are in the process, you can start to send in those questions, and we are so excited to answer them all. We also have some that were sent in beforehand that we'll go over too, but we'll definitely focus first on your guys' questions. As a company too, we're super unique because we do have a limited number of students that we work with, because we want to be able to focus completely on you. We work with them on undergrad applications, med school applications, and even grad school applications. And of course, as many of you guys probably know, we do have a really strong focus on highly selective college admissions and direct medical programs, which of course are already or are referred to as BSMD programs. And so the good news too is we really do work closely together with all of our students, and with all of our counselors together. So you really are getting a lot of collective advice, even if you're only working one-on-one with one of the counselors. But we do have a little special that Kevin's going to explain.
Sure. And we do see your questions in the chat. When we get to that general area of our time tonight, we will start getting into them. We do see, we just want to acknowledge that. But our personal statement package, it's a great opportunity where, a lot of rising seniors, I know you're very concerned about how to make your personal statement shine, especially given the short time between now and some of the early application deadlines. So, this package may be a great fit for you. So, for this, we will do, as part of this process, there's sort of 2 to 3 rounds of revisions and a couple of Zoom calls. Basically, we'll help you come up with a suitable topic, one that is sufficiently, personal, and not not generic, not things that admissions counselors have read 1,000 times before. We'll also sort of after that, that second Zoom call, maybe focus a little more on the organization of the essay, make sure that it looks as good on the page as it did in our brainstorm, right? And then kind of we'll help polish it up to make sure it's actually presentable. So it's a great opportunity to make your personal statement shine. The details are on screen there for you. And I mean, a nice thing about this as well is that it'll get you into the routine of kind of personal narrative writing, which you'll use elsewhere in your application as well. I know someone in the chat asked about Stanford, and that that is one where it's an example of supplements where this writing style of an effective personal narrative may help you with more than just the personal statement. So it's a great opportunity. Please do reach out to us if you want to take advantage of that. Is there anything else you'd like to add, Lindsay, to that?
That's perfect. You can email me. I'll put my email in the chat, but it was on the previous screen. I'll go back to it for a second. It's just down here, the Lindsay@moonprep.com. You can email me to get started. And if you are a rising senior, you definitely should take advantage of this. We're going to go over some essays later on. But I'll put my email in the chat too, but it's just Lindsay@MoonPrep. Cool. Well, before we get into some of the questions that were emailed in, how about we take a look at some of the questions from our audience? We'll just start from the top. And if we do happen to accidentally miss your question, just resend it back in and we're kind of going to go down in order too. But first one is, do you have any advice and tips for the Stanford supplemental essays? That's a great question because there are 6 or 7 or 8 or something like that. The 5 short answer, the roommate one, intellectual curiosity one. Is that what we talked about, Kevin?
Yep.
So those are those ones. For that one, the biggest piece of advice I would say is every word really matters, especially for the 50 word essays. Like, for example, they want you to talk about something you're excited about at Stanford or how you spent, your last 2 summers. Think really wisely about each word that you're putting in there, making sure that you're not overly explaining things too. This is kind of the moment to be quick and zippy with things because they want to see some of your personality, but in a quick way. So like, for example, if this summer you attended family weddings with your family, don't say with your family twice. Think about how you can make it clear and concise. Just say I attended family weddings. It can be fun. It can be more serious things if you did research, include that. But if you went every single day and got ice cream with your grandma, you can definitely add that stuff in too because they want to see how you like to spend your time. So
yeah,
the biggest piece of advice I would have is just add in some personality too.
Yeah, for sure. And just as an additional note, because that's great advice, and I would definitely heed that. 2 of the supplements, of the longer ones, the 250 words one is something meaningful to you, and the intellectual curiosity one. And a trap that I think we're tempted to fall into is just to sort of summarize our accomplishments or our relevant accomplishments in the field we're interested in. So, if I'm a biology student, I might list my science Olympiad awards and maybe science courses I took at community college. You want to kind of take a more creative approach than just listing your accomplishments. You don't want to be redundant with other material that you have in your application. So just give some thought to that. And if you're not sure how to do that, speaking to a counselor or a teacher who could help you may be a good way to go.
Definitely, that's good advice. Cool. All right, let's move on to our next one. I'll let you tackle this one first, Kevin, if you want.
Sure. Okay. And Lindsay, I may be misunderstanding this, but I think that the box that this person is referring to is one that's just asking, right? It's asking for your info to send your info to the school so they can contact you. Is that that's what this sounds like to me.
I wasn't sure if they said that how you had been in contact with the school. That was kind of my question, what I was interpreting it as. So it said how have you been in contact with us? Have you been on social media, website, school guidance counselor?
Okay.
If that's what you're asking, let us know. But that's what I was going under the assumption.
Okay. If that's the, because I mean sometimes you get asked whether it's they're allowed to send your info to schools to another checkbox I think for that. But if regarding Lindsay's sort of interpretation of it, Anytime you can show demonstrated interest in a school, it's a perfect you should do so.
Yeah.
So if they've asked like how you've been in touch with the school, you don't want to like lie, right, about it. But if you're interested in a school, do a visit, even if it's only available via Zoom, right? Talk to an alumni,
Mhm.
try to reach out. That is something that because admissions is recruiting students, right? So it's something that they keep track of. It's we are in 2021. Data is being tracked for everything nowadays. So
Mhm.
if you can demonstrate interest, that's it's better to do that than to not. And so be honest, but make sure to reach out to the school and try to show that you're interested.
Yeah, definitely. And I think that that's kind of key too. It's like the little things that you can be doing. There's really no excuse to not be able to even virtually visit a school. Almost every single one does have something online right now. And so, no way one thing is more valuable than to visit Fair alumni because it's not really, they're not going to judge you if you couldn't come in person because that's impossible if you're in Florida. They're not going to expect you to be able to go to California or Maine or New York or whatever it is. So, just having contact with them, reaching out, you know, social media even could be a great way of doing it. So that would be my biggest piece of advice. I just want to track to see how interested you are too. Okay, and I see Sultana. Sorry if I'm saying it wrong. She sent in a couple questions kind of about her dermatology club. So it's hard to answer this without knowing more information. But I saw that you kind of were wondering too about how you can turn it more into an actual club at high schools. So I would definitely just start first with your own high school. You'll likely need to get a teacher sponsor as well. And so that would be something that takes time. So if you are a rising senior, it might not be possible to do because there's just a lot of procedures, a lot of red tape. You have to get the teacher on board and then the principal, and then whatever other kind of steps you need to take. Um, if you're younger, it is a little bit easier to get that going because it just might take. I've had students who try to start it their junior year and it didn't start until like their senior year. Um, but that would be the number one step is just starting your own high school first and then help it kind of filter or to ripple effect bigger. As for what maybe to do with your online organization about dermatology, I mean, maybe consider partnering with other organizations too. Like if you do have speaker series or something like that, having someone in dermatology or working in neuroscience come in and like educate people on their career paths and things like that. That could be like an interesting way to like incorporate and add some more value. But it's hard to know specifically what you should do, but that would be kind of things to think about. Anything you want to add to that one, Kevin?
No, I mean, I largely agree. I think unfortunately, this one's a hard one without
Yeah.
context, because how you grow from here is kind of dependent on your situation. But um, I mean, at this point too, I'd say it's also if you have community contacts. So with a local nonprofit, that may be a way to grow as well. So, but yeah, I mean, that's really starting at your schools. I agree with Lindsay; is the best way to go, and beyond there, it's going to kind of be context specific.
Hmm. Definitely. Cool. All right. I'll handle this next one about MoonPrep's admissions rate for direct med programs. It's a great question. So we don't track exactly just direct med programs. Um, but what we do track is like an overall success rate. So 94% of our students get into one or more of their top three schools each year. And so for a lot of our students, it is BSMD programs. So like last year, our students got into Baylor, um, Drexel, Penn State, Boston, Hofstra, Temple, Toledo, St. Louis, a wide variety of different programs. And then of course it could be like their top traditional undergrad as well. So for our students, it was like UPenn, Cornell, University of Chicago, Berkeley, other really great universities too. And so that stat of 94% is overarching for both traditional and BSMD. Okay, let's look at our next question. Why you do this one, Kevin?
Sure. Okay. New guidance counselor. Okay. So, the first thing is I would suggest setting up a meeting with this person, right? Allow them to get to know you, right? Create that
Yeah.
opportunity. That's step one. Usually in this case, right? And this is something that students I think we work with, we'd both suggest regardless, right? Because even if it was your old counselor, maybe they've only seen you 2 or 3 times total, right? Um, is once you get to meet them, is it's okay, and you can talk with them when you meet them about this. It's okay to kind of provide like a fact sheet about you, to have a resume ready to go, or to have like like, so for example, if you're really heavily involved, like to a couple areas where you're involved in school, so if you're really heavily involved with the Red Cross Club, like you can let them know that in that resume, and you can say, hey, talk to whoever the teacher advisor is about that. They can tell you more about me, right? So that it's counselors understand, like they that, yeah, especially ones that, especially this one who she's new working with you, she'll understand that she doesn't have many touch points for you, and that she'll have to write things for you because sometimes certain materials are requested directly from a counselor. So, it's okay. Just set up that meeting. If they are slow in setting up that meeting, unresponsive, like, be insistent, polite, polite but insistent, right? You can email them again, right? You can show up early in the morning, right? At school and try to get that meeting in. But as part of that process in that meeting, let them know what you need from them. Be very straightforward about it, and ask them if like that would help, right? Providing them that material, that resume, that fact sheet about you, and because that is something they've probably seen before, and that way they can kind of get to know you without in a short amount of time, right? And write an effective letter of recommendation for you.
Perfect.
Yeah.
That's great advice. And for teachers too, it doesn't hurt to give them that, even if they know you well, to give them that type of information about your goals and things like that. Because they'll be writing a lot of applications or letters of rec, and so it just is something that kind of makes it a little bit easier as you go along. Okay, let's see. Another great question about online volunteering and shadowing work worth it. 1,000%. Especially in COVID era, it's still going on, and a lot of places are just not letting, especially high school students, come in and shadow. So places like web shadowers or like virtual shadowing. Trying to remember what some of the other places are, but there's a lot of good shadowing options out there online, virtual shadowings, and no matter what kind of thing it is, if it is, there's like direct dental shadowing and things like that too. So there's a ton of different options available. And so those are all worthwhile because of course it's not going to be the same as in person, but I think the virtual shadowing almost has its advantages because yes, you don't get to see the patient, but you get to hear the doctor's thought process, which you wouldn't be able to do really if it was in the moment because you would just see what came out of their mouth. You wouldn't understand why they did what they did. And so that's why I think virtual shadowing has its benefits because also you're not restricted to just one specialty. Like if you were doing a dermatologist for 40 hours, you might see the same cases over and over again. But for virtual shadowing, you can do a dermatologist for an hour. You can do a radiologist for an hour. There's some crazy specialties out there like food medicine and stuff like that. Who even knew that was around? So you can really explore, and I think that that's kind of the advantage of them. And then the ones that you're like super interested in, if you're able to, like if you're like, oh, cardiology is my thing, go do a cardiologist then. Figuring out what really you're interested in, and maybe it will help you narrow it down. As for online volunteer work, absolutely too. There's a ton of like tutoring, listening, kind of crisis. I'm trying to think, volunteer groups and things like that. There can be a lot of really valuable volunteer groups, or volunteering that you can do there. But of course, like I wouldn't say like every single online volunteering activity is going to be worth it. It kind of depends on what you're able to do. If you're just kind of sitting there and not doing anything, it's not going to be valuable. You're not learning anything. So definitely try and seek out ones where you get to really do things and learn some things as you go along.
Yeah, I mean, to build on that online volunteering part, admissions offices are very aware of the constraints
Yeah.
created by COVID. It's why so many schools are going test optional in their admissions process. And so when it comes to like online volunteering, if you're thinking, well, what is meaningful and what's not, because that might be the natural next question, right? Is if you were involved with a current activity, you've had to go online, right? Maybe to do it, or maybe you guys have been quiet and you want to restart it again and going online. So going online was something that, to go kind of create more depth to an activity you already have is a great opportunity to do online volunteering. So whatever local, local Rotary Club, local Red Cross, whatever is at your school, whatever clubs you're involved in, right? Taking that online, right, and making an impact online with that activity is a great way to continue. Is a great way to do something that's online that actually adds depth to your application. The other thing as well is I know that like sometimes online shadowing is not as fulfilling maybe as in-person shadowing. There's ways you can augment that as well. So granted, it's hard to get shadowing hours this way, but if you want to do like an informational interview with like a doctor in a specialization that you're interested in. So if you're interested in cardiology, if you can get a hold of a cardiologist and just do like an hour on Zoom, like asking him questions, that's very meaningful. And that's something that would be great. So if you're like, hey, I did this shadowing program, whatever program it is, and then I also spent time on Zoom, doing a couple informational interviews with some cardiologists. I think the admissions office, for these BSMD programs would look very favorably at that. So, because you're taking a lot of initiative that way, right? So, like they're very valid, the ones that are out there. And, if you're worried that there's a gap sort of in that program, you can take the initiative and fill it.
Yeah, absolutely. Those are all great ones. Okay, let's see. Oh, another great question that students always ask. I have to say the optional part. Kevin, I'll let you answer this as a former grad admissions officer. What do you think?
Yeah, so you don't have to. Here's the thing, because there's a lot of optional segments in an application. Like, in the common application, there's some optional sections to the common application itself. So right now there's like maybe like an optional COVID statement, right? It's something that it truly is optional. Sometimes you'll have supplements for individual schools. They'll just ask like, do you have a criminal background? Or, they'll ask you some short answer questions, right? That stuff it's optional to answer, and you can just answer shortly, right? Do you have a criminal background? You can just write no, right? You don't have to write a whole essay for it, right? So that stuff is optional, but the reason I didn't give you a blanket no, right, is that sometimes, for example, when you're applying to a school, there'll be optional supplements, right? Asking you maybe like why you're interested in applying like to business school or whatever, right? Or asking you why you're, maybe it's an optional application to be considered for an honors program. So pay attention to what that optional segment is. Something that is asking you to explain away a negative. So, is there a circumstance you wish to explain? That truly is optional, unless you have a relevant circumstance, or maybe you got sick during COVID and that screwed up your grades for a semester, right? Yeah. I would definitely fill out the COVID section in that case. But unless it's something like that, those sections are optional. Then also think about like, hey, like, why is this optional? So if it's like asking about a scholarship and you want to be considered, you need to pay attention and fill that out, right? So yes, it is optional, but you may be losing an opportunity depending on what the optional section you're talking about is.
Mm-hmm. And there's some schools, like Harvard comes to mind. I think their like intellectual life one is optional. It might be wrong, but then they also have like an optional, like, you can submit an essay of any topic of your choice. So it's like, if you felt like you hadn't portrayed something in your application, like you had some really great opportunities that you just didn't get to talk about, you can use that time to talk about it. But on the Common App, they also do have that 650 word essay or area where you can enter in additional information. That's not an opportunity to enter in another personal statement. That's not what it's there for. And so if you are kind of seen as trying to cram in an extra personal statement, it can look poorly upon you. But essentially follow directions. If like they ask if, like what Kevin was saying, if you have a criminal background, you say no, but then use that space to tell them about another activity. That's not what it's there for. So definitely use follow directions as always. All right, another good extracurricular one. Had a lot of ECs or extracurriculars and filled out all 10 activity boxes. Would that look like trying too hard? No. Because sometimes you might do a summer camp. It's 4 weeks. You do 3 of them, that's 3 boxes right there. So, you're going to do a wide variety of different things. 10 is not too many. If you don't have 10, if you have 7, that's totally fine too. They look for quality over quantity, I would say. And so focusing on just like not doing 20 different activities for the sake of doing them. 10 definitely isn't too many, especially if you felt like you were able to dedicate time to them and had, leadership position, and not all of them, but in, one or two of them. And, we're able to make a real impact in some of your activities too. That's, the main thing I would think about. And even if you don't have leadership in any of them, it's okay too, because it's about how you were able to impact people in the group, not just like surface level participation. But 10 is not too many. We see that a lot, especially for our BSMD students. You have to do shadowing. You have to do kind of hospital volunteering. You probably do not have to do volunteering and don't have to do shadowing, but a lot of them do. And probably your other kinds of volunteering, maybe some sports. And so it all adds up. And so you are spending a lot of time. You are busy students. Is there anything you want to add to that one?
No, I think you covered it. It's one of those things too. It's just that I guess, and this is advice you've probably seen elsewhere. One just you want to probably like make sure you prioritize. When
Yeah.
you write out all your activities and prioritize the 10 most important ones.
Yeah.
And that sounds like that may be your problem, given that you have 10, or you probably have more than 10, and you're like, oh man, I have so many. This is trying too hard. So just make sure you prioritize the 10 sort of most important ones that you dedicate the most time to, right? So that's the only other thing. But yeah, I mean, I think Lindsay hit the nail on the head.
Yeah. And I'm going to skip down because this one's so related, about who had very few extracurriculars. So the other side of it, yeah, it's okay too. Like if you were super involved, that's okay. And some students don't have a ton of extracurriculars because like they had, like for example, I had one student who every single summer she had to go down to Mexico and take care of her grandma. That counted as one of the 10 activities on her list because family responsibilities is one of them. So instead of being able to go to summer camp or volunteering, she was in Mexico taking care of her grandmother, for 3 months out of the year. And so you can put down family responsibilities too if you're like, well, I didn't have a lot of extracurriculars, but I also had to come home and, watch my brother for 3 hours every day. That's a huge chunk of your time that you're spending. So I know that doesn't relate to your situation, but they do see it and they're going to understand situations like that. So if you're super involved, that's totally fine if you just have a few.
Yeah, and I mean, also as well for this, as this is one where I would suggest kind of writing something out and sitting down with maybe your school counselor or someone to take a look at it, just because sometimes like students kind of maybe have more than they think they do or less than they think they do. So to give
Yes.
you an example, like I've worked with students where they think like volunteering is one activity, but they volunteered with like 4 different organizations, and that could be four
Mhm.
different activities, right? Because what they're doing with each organization is not the same, right? There's different responsibilities, different titles with each organization. So you same with instruments, right? So like if you play 4 instruments, is that one activity? Could that be more than one activity? It could be more than one, right? So um, writing everything out and sitting down with a counselor is advised here, just because you may have more than you think as well.
Definitely. Yeah. I'm always shocked too. I'll work with kids for a year sometimes before I find out that they did something like really awesome or really cool because it just like slipped their minds because they have so many other things going on. And so talk to your parents too about this because you'll be surprised about what they'll remember
Yeah.
that you did freshman year that you don't remember anymore.
Yeah, and I guess on that note too, it's just because something isn't, especially now with COVID, right, where like
Yeah.
extracurricular opportunities are kind of limited depending on where you live, right? Um,
Mm-hmm.
just because something isn't through a school club doesn't mean it's not an activity, right? Like as Lindsay's talked about a few non-traditional examples, taking care of your grandmother, or maybe did an internship or something, but um, if it's also like, okay, well, I wasn't in my orchestra, but like I've played violin for 10 years and like I'm still taking weekly lessons in violin, right? Like that's still an activity.
Yeah.
You're spending a lot of time doing it, and you spend a lot of time doing it for a long time, right? So just because you're not in school orchestra doesn't mean it's not an activity. Hopefully that makes sense.
Definitely. Yeah, definitely you see both sides of everything. So there's no right or wrong way to college admissions. And that's the important thing to always remember is what works for some isn't going to work 100% of the time. Just because this kid did XYZ doesn't mean you're going to get in and vice versa. So, there's multiple paths and that's okay. Okay, let me go back up here. Okay, about test optional. This is a great question. You choose to go test optional for some schools, like 3 out of 10. They choose to apply. Yeah, yeah, you can totally do that. Because each time you apply to school, you'll resubmit. So you just have to make sure you change that you don't want to submit scores. Like whenever the school specific question, they'll ask you, make sure you don't list it. And that's not an issue. You can absolutely decide to not submit scores. Anything you want to add to that? Yep.
No,
Easy enough.
that's it.
Yep, that's easy enough. I'll let you do this one.
So this is a tough question because like there's admissions to a university like MIT, right? Where you have to remember, like at MIT, they have they can get a bunch of people, right, with a 3 point. I'm just gonna use a 3.8 as an unweighted 3.8 or higher, right? They can fill up their class 5 times over with the number of applicants they get with someone who
Mhm.
fits that profile. So okay, well then is it worth it to apply, right? It depends. Like, what does the rest of your profile look like, right? If you've taken like, if your relative course load has been relatively unchallenging, like you have like one AP, no IB, no other college courses, right? Don't have much for activities, low SAT, ACT score, then no, it's not, because the profile maybe is not strong enough for that to be a worthwhile kind of reach, right? So this is really context specific.
Yeah.
If other parts of your profile are very strong, then yeah, it may be worth a shot, right? But it's hard to answer that question without a holistic sense of who you are, because the admissions process at most, if not all, these top universities is holistic. It's not based on one factor, especially this year. Just because with so much,
Yeah.
de-emphasizing the quants, with the types of optional stuff. So, depends what the rest of your profile looks like.
Yeah. Short answer.
Yeah.
Yeah, you could totally do it. 3.9, but that's not the reason why you get in. And I feel like that actually just had a new client call with a family, and that was one of the things that they thought, if you have a 4.0 and a 1600, that's like kind of what you need to get into top universities. And yeah, it's a piece of the puzzle, but it's definitely not the most important or only piece of the puzzle that they're looking at. There's definitely a step. There's many steps that they look at. So a student who's got a 3.5 could totally get into
Yeah.
MIT. It just depends on what the rest of their profile looks like too.
Right. Because maybe that person, they've taken half a dozen community college courses, they got
Yeah.
12 APs, they started a nonprofit, right? Compared to the 3.9 example we gave, that person is a little bit more impressive. So,
Yeah.
the other thing I'd say as well, because I want you to be in a good place, you're asking this question, is that even if you're confident with your profile, you can't assume anything, right? You need to apply to have a good diversity of choices in your
Yes.
application, because even if objectively, let's say we go down a notch and we look at like Boston College, right? Which is Boston area, but it's not, or well, I guess in Massachusetts, but it's not as competitive as MIT, right? And you're like, well, I'm really confident I can get into Boston College. Even if your quantitative factors are higher, much higher than the typical thing, like, you just don't know what they're looking for their incoming class, or maybe they filled a disproportionate number of seats with like restrictive early action that year, right? And there's just only a few slots left, and there's just someone better, right? So you need to have good diversity in your college list, just
Yeah.
because it's not just quantitative. There may be factors that in the admissions process that you can't predict, and you want to give yourself some good options.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And kind of piggybacking off of that too, just because maybe the average applicant at MIT or the average accepted student at MIT, I'm making this up, I have no clue what it is off the top of my head. Let's just say it's a 3.8 and their average SAT score is a 1470. If you have a 1550 and a 3.9, that doesn't mean you're a shoo-in, because like Kevin said earlier, there's a lot of students who get rejected. There's just not enough spots. Every single student cannot be accepted who's above that threshold, and there is a lot of factors. So look at acceptance rates too to kind of make that balanced list for sure. Okay. And then for this one, I'll just kind of breeze through it so everyone else knows it too. Because we obviously talked about a personal statement package. Yes, we do have a ton of packages for helping the student with the whole application. I put my email again in there. So you can schedule a call with me and learn more about them. But we do have like different levels for every single school of student, kind of hourly based, where you can work on whatever you want to work on with us too. If you just need help with interviews, essays, just specific personal statements, but you think you need more help than this, whatever it might be, we can kind of guide you through that process. Okay. Now this is another good one about, can you give advice for a student who wants to be in the pre-med track? And that's most of what we do. So we can definitely help you with that process. One thing that I would suggest too for you is to try and get some hands-on experience within the pre-med track. Guiding them through the process, if it is shadowing, if it is, volunteering, focusing a lot of your classes on STEM classes, especially like the advanced classes. So, you don't have to take every single AP class, just focus your energies on maybe bio or physics or calculus or things like that. So that stuff will all be okay, but I would say mostly focus on getting some hands-on opportunities in that field. There's really no right or wrong way. If you want to do research, of course, you can seek out some research opportunities. If research isn't your thing, then, focus more on the clinical side of things and maybe try and get some experience working in a nursing home. Figuring out how you can really be interacting with people is going to be key. Cool. We can keep on moving to the next one, which is about rolling admissions, which is an interesting take. I'll let you do this one too, Kevin.
Yeah. So not always. Like there's. I wish it was. I'm sure all of you wish the college admissions process and decision making was much more standardized. It would make all of our lives much easier, but it's not universal. But generally speaking, the turnaround time on decisions is a bit quicker for rolling admissions schools because they're not processing all their applications at once, right? So usually the turnaround is a little bit faster. But here's the thing too, is that it's not always the case because some of these rolling admission schools have deadlines that are really late. So, if the application isn't due until February, they may just wait to kind of see what other applications coming in before give that turnaround, right? But if they know, if they have a solid yes or no for you, they'll oftentimes turn that around pretty quickly. So, I mean, I don't know if there's anything you want to add to that. Let's see.
No, I mean, I've never personally done a confidence booster.
Yeah.
As a rolling, like I'm not going to specifically make you apply to a school and pay $65 or whatever it is for the application fee, just so that your confidence gets up quicker. Because I think that your acceptance is, because we'll have a balanced list, it's going to come. So that's not really something I've ever prioritized, but if you don't mind wasting $65 for a school you probably aren't going to attend, if it's your safety, that's great. But, or however much the application fee is, but I don't know.
Yeah, because I think the same person has a follow-up question.
Oh,
Well, it's
perfect.
like a part two, like if the school doesn't have programs I like, what's the point of having acceptance in hand, right?
Oh, yes.
To,
Yeah.
to this idea of confidence boosters, right? And
Yeah.
you're right, like there's not a point to that. But here's the thing. It's like, is it that you don't like the school at all, or is it you don't like the school as much as your favorite reach school, right? If I'm someone who's technical and MIT is my dream school, right? Like, is it that I don't like this safety school, maybe like UMass Amherst, or is it I just don't like it as much as MIT, right? Those are two different things. If it's that I just don't like it as much as MIT, but there's some pretty good parts to it. Maybe having that acceptance in hand might be good, right? But just as Lindsay said, just applying to it for the sake of applying to it, if you're not going to attend anyway, right? Under any circumstance, then yeah, that's pointless.
Yeah, exactly. Even if it's like you should have safeties that would be willing to attend if all else fails. Because like it is kind of nice where sometimes students end up going to like an in-state safety because it's just cheaper and they still got into a good program. So, there's a lot of different factors, but yeah, I'm not really, I think I'm in agreement with you, Kevin. No point in applying if you're not excited and you wouldn't go anyway. Okay, let's see. Next one about supplemental essays. Are they the same every year? Nope. Sometimes they are, sometimes they aren't. What should a rising junior start with the actual college application, not just research in colleges? Start with scholarships. Yeah, so if you go on our YouTube page, Michaela and Nicole, who are two other MoonPrep counselors, have done several webinars on scholarships. Start off with those. We also have, if you go on our Eventbrite page, we have like a 9-day crash course in scholarships as well that Michaela put together. Watch those because Michaela did a really great job. And so each day, it's not a live course. Each day, a video will be released to you with some information about it. So take advantage of those. As for what can a junior do to start with the college application process, you can also, you could start with your personal statement if you feel like you have the experiences that you would want to talk about. Like if you're between your junior senior year, you're planning to do a really big project, a really big research thing that you would want to talk about in your personal statement, then hold off on it. But if you felt like you were ready, that you wanted to at least write one draft of it, there's no reason why you can't start with a personal statement because those tend to be kind of consistent across the board. There'll be similar themes. So you can look at the colleges you're applying to now and at least see what consistent themes you're seeing in your essays, because it might be major essays, it might be community or diversity or activity essays, similar themes, but check with your school to see what themes you're seeing, at least this year.
Yeah, I guess as well, if you're someone who is BSMD or if you're applying, you're going to apply to a lot of colleges. There's certain things beyond just what Lindsay mentioned, because if you're applying to a lot of colleges or BSMD, you'll have to write for sure multiple why major essays or a why doctor supplement. If you're BSMD, why do you want to enter the medical field? So, that's something that you can get a head start on. You may have to adjust it right when the year, next year comes around to the appropriate prompts, but your experiences related to medicine aren't going to change. Like your an original interest for getting in the field, that's not going to change, right? So same, even if you're non-BSMD and you're just like, well, do I want to study biology or computer science or business, right? You probably know the answers to that, so you can give a shot at drafting that out.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. And if it changes, then you can change it. And if it's, if you just end up having to tweak it, it's okay too. So if you're applying to summer programs too, a lot of these essays will be similar, which is nice. So you'll see similar themes as well as with scholarships. A lot of the essays are going to be similar, like tell us about you impacted your community or what do you want to be when you grow up. So a lot of these are going to be kind of similar essays actually. Okay, let's see. We can skip that one because we already did that one. Okay, so which medical BSMD programs require the MMI interview and which ones require Casper? Um, so for the MMI, a lot of the SUNY upstates usually require them. Last year, some did, some didn't, just because of COVID, because it was all virtual interviews, and so it was a little bit harder to do hybrid, or sorry, not hybrid, the MMI. Off the top of my head, the ones that I can think of that were in addition, I think was RPI also did MMI last year. It could change, honestly, from year to year. As for ones that require Casper, the only one I can think of off the top of my head is Hofstra. So it's pretty casual on when you need to do those and when you don't need to do those. If you do need help, like if any of the BSMD programs you do encounter have MMI, it is really important that you prepare and you honestly do work with a specialist too on that front, just because those are really tricky. If you go in prepared to talk about, just so like people who don't know what MMI is, if you go in prepared to talk about yourself, you wouldn't do very well because these are more like ethical dilemmas. How would you respond to these types of things? So it is really important that you do prepare and take some time. And so
Yeah,
if that is what you encounter, definitely reach out to us. We can help you prepare for those.
for sure, for sure. The only other thing I want to add to that, Anita, yeah, I mean, I just to hammer home the point, right? Like, it's just a very non-traditional interview, right? You may
Yeah.
have multiple people you're talking to, none of whom are giving you any feedback or input or
Yeah.
expressions, right? So it's difficult. Being with specialists is suggested for that. The other thing is that regardless, I mean, my understanding is the same as Lindsay's for the schools that offer it, but or that require those type of interviews. But no matter what, I would check for your BSMD programs because COVID this year is really going to impact things because maybe your school will require it, or maybe it'll be in a different format than it usually is, right? So because things are kind of up in the air with the pandemic, I would definitely check with the individual school. And it's okay to reach out to them directly and ask, like, hey, do you require these and what format are they in and how do I go about it, right? So yeah, make sure to check.
Cool. All right. So now let's look at this. Oops. Here we go. Can you apply early action to multiple universities? Yes, you may. I guess the one caveat is if there's restrictive early action, you can only do that to one university. Um, or you can do it early decision to one university. So you can't do restrictive early action and ED. It has to be one or the other. If you do restrictive early action, you're technically only allowed to apply early action then to like public universities. Private universities are against the rules for whatever reason. That's kind of one thing. But yeah, you could do early action to University of Michigan, University of North Carolina. I'm trying to think of other places that have it. All the other ones that have it, you could do as many as you wanted, and no restrictions.
Yeah. Yeah, that's 100% right. I guess on hit the nail on the head. I guess the only other thing is that sometimes it won't be called restrictive early action. They may call it like single choice early action.
Yeah.
So it's one of those things that if it's anything beyond early action, right? If you phrase it anything beyond early action, so
Yeah.
single early action, restrictive early action, it's falling into that category that Lindsay's describing.
Yeah, that's good. Good point. Yeah, because it can be confusing. It can be definitely really
Yeah, for
confusing.
sure. Yeah.
And then I'm going to skip down to this one because it kind of is related about the benefits of EA. So I'll let you do this one.
Sure. Yes, there's a higher acceptance rate. It's a pretty straightforward thing. So there is that benefit. And there's a few reasons. There's a higher acceptance rate. Like one, you're indicating a higher level of interest, right? So they understand that you're more likely to attend, even though it's not binding in the same way early decision is, right? Depending on the school, right? So, yeah, there's a higher acceptance rate. As far as like merit aid and priority, it's kind of going to depend on the school. There is typically a better chance at some merit aid, but that is not a universal thing. I can't say that as a blanket statement.
Yeah. Yeah, usually, yeah, for the merit does kind of help,
Yeah.
but not every school,
Yeah.
for sure.
Yeah.
Cool. All right, let's go to some more COVID questions. So COVID affects everyone and every school. If I don't have extreme hardship, what should I write in additional information? Yes. So I would never ever suggest that you write just, oh, online classes was hard and like it took some time to get used to them. Because how would your story necessarily be different from someone else's? So, I mean, you can write about things maybe that you had planned. So, like if you had, we're going to in-person summer camp, it got canceled, you can write about that. So it's something that would have happened that's now not going to show up on your application if you got into like a really competitive one and it didn't happen. That can be kind of the opportunity to show like kind of what could your application could have looked like if not for COVID. But if you really don't think you have anything, if that doesn't really seem like it's resonate with you, then it would be better to leave it blank because they only have a limited amount of time to read your application. And if you're just going to write fluff and things that really could apply to anyone, it's not worth it to waste your time and their time.
Nope, I'm 100% agree with that.
Oh, perfect. Let's look at a couple more. Girls pre-med, but now might want to do marketing.
Okay. So, Sultana, so a couple things. Like one, and this is a general note for everybody, like just because your activities lean one direction doesn't not mean you have to apply for that in your major, right?
Yes.
For example, we work with a lot of BSMD students, but there's a few of them who are like, they did a lot of computer science type stuff, right? And that's just because they like coding, right? It's just something they were interested in, and they did a robotics club, and that's fine. There's nothing wrong with that. Especially if you're applying to a general marketing major in a College of Arts and Sciences. The College of Arts and Sciences has a million majors at most universities, so that's not going to negatively impact you at all, right? And having a diverse set of extracurriculars could actually turn in your favor. Now, as far as like, well, okay, I mean, I have nothing related to marketing. I would like to show at least a little bit of it somehow, right? One is, maybe you have something existing in your activities. Maybe if you did something in DECA and there was like outreach involved, like, that is a marketing thing, right? If you did a volunteer or internship that involved any sort of social media, like, pushes, right? That is marketing, right? So you may have something in there, try to sit down, write out, maybe fill out a resume and write out a resume, and maybe there's stuff in there, right, that you'll find. The other thing is as well, and this is, I say this because it could be true of any subject, right? Um, because because we're dealing with COVID, online things are just as valid. So either getting creative with your own online opportunity, or just taking like a course on Coursera, right? If there's like a digital marketing course on Coursera that looks kind of interesting, you could take it, and that shows demonstrated interest, right? That you're taking these marketing or marketing theory, right? Like, that those are all valid ways to show an interest, right? So established online course, a volunteer activity, a lot of, I mean, there are online volunteer activities out there, where you can help fundraise, right? That is a way to show marketing and outreach. So um, really, I mean, the world's your oyster. It's just sort of because things are remote right now, there is some initiative that you'll have to take to really to pursue those opportunities, but they are out there.
Yeah. And something too, because I think you were the one that was talking about your dermatology like organization. You probably
Mm.
market it there. So that could be something when you're talking about a Y major, you talk about your experiences specifically with marketing. So there's a ton of different ways you could do this. Okay, so we only will have time for a couple more questions, but we'll get to as many as we can before we have to hop off. But I see someone asked about how do I put online volunteer work on the college application? Do I mention on the application that the volunteering is online? I mean, you totally can. I think that you can put it just the same. A lot of times we have been doing virtual just because it is a different experience. And so, if it is virtual tutoring, you're having a whole different other experience with than in person. So you can kind of talk about the challenges that were specific to virtual tutoring in essays, obviously not in like the Common App activity section. So I think it's still kind of a benefit to mention that it's online. It doesn't hurt. They won't look at it any less because also they know COVID is going on. They're not going to judge you because you did online tutoring rather than in-person tutoring with COVID.
Yeah. And in the Common App activities list, anyways, you only have 150 characters to describe the activity. So, I mean, I wouldn't either way. I would just try to focus on describing the activity in the most accurate and favorable way possible, and not stress out about whether online. Just try to get it accurately out there in 150
Yeah,
characters on the activities list.
definitely. Ooh, all right, we'll do these last couple ones. Ooh, you might be a better one for this. Spike versus theme. Because I feel like they could be kind of the same.
Yeah,
I mean, a spike is when a lot of your activities all point to the same thing.
yeah.
So if it is all computer
Well,
science,
see, this is where like I'm trying to in my brain like get the differentiation between the two.
yeah,
Um,
I think maybe theme is you could have multiple themes, but you probably only have one spike.
yeah, and I guess like I've seen Spike apply more to like a specific academic or professional focus, where
Yes.
themes like could be something like empathy, right? So like I
Yes.
did volunteering, and and I worked at a crisis line, or stuff like that, right? Like, and that's not so much a spike, maybe more of a theme. So
Yeah.
um, but yeah,
Yeah. There's no real universal language for it, to be honest.
yeah.
So yeah. All right. Last question. Many colleges accept a supplemental portfolio. Oh, sorry, an arts supplement slash portfolio. A lot of the times, oh, is it advantageous to submit one? Let me finish the question. A lot of times you can only submit if you're doing a specific major. So if you were doing biology, you wouldn't just be able to submit your arts portfolio. So I would only submit if it makes sense for your major and for you.
Yep, I agree. And the other thing is also just how impressive would this portfolio be, right? So for example, if you play an instrument and you've made like the all-state like band or choir or orchestra, and you maybe you have like a professional certification, and so like if that's a highly impressive activity, and maybe then like you may submit one anyway, right? But unless it's at like that kind of level, I would only submit it if it makes sense, like related to your major. If you are theater, if you are architecture, which they'll ask for our portfolio for that. If you are in the physical arts, right, or like the visual arts, right, graphic design, something like that. Only do it in that case, unless you have something that is just so impressive that you want them to know about. That you're way better, like that you may be one of the top applicants or the top applicant in that right, in their upcoming class. Unless it's at that level, I would only do it if it makes sense for the major.
Yeah. Okay. Okay, we'll do the last two. Okay, promise, and then we're done. So for the UC application activity, how to describe, write down how many hours per week I volunteered or did the activity. Average. I mean, the nice thing about the I guess for the UCs, it's not quite like that. I mean, if you did it sometimes 10 hours, sometimes 2 hours, 5 hours on average. So like, it's not too big of a deal if it's an average. So just make sure whenever you do your averages that it makes sense for the activities. You didn't say that you spent 70 hours a week doing activities because that just isn't realistic. So that would be definitely one thing to think about. Just put together your averages at the end. And then the last one is about how do they review essay counts that are lower or higher than the limit? Well, you can't submit them higher than the limit anyway, because they'll have a strict cutoff after 250 words or whatever it is, you can't submit anymore. So that one's a moot point. But if it's that it's considerably lower than the limit, I wouldn't suggest adding fluff, but if the word limit is like 500 words about like why you went to go to this college and you only write 200 words, it definitely doesn't look great. So it depends on the essay. Sometimes they really have big word counts, like maybe it's 1,000 words or something like that. And if you feel like you did it in 700 words, that's fine. But, make sure you're telling the whole story and you're not leaving anything on the table.
No, I agree with Lindsay on that one. I guess the only other thing there is, it's more important just to have the best essay possible than to worry about word count.
Yeah. Yes.
That's the most important thing. So it doesn't really matter what the word count is. It's just that, as Lindsay said, right? If it's a 750 word limit and you got like 200 to 300 words, it's just like there better be a very good reason that you didn't use the other words.
Yeah, definitely. So that's the big thing to think about. Cool. All right, we'll have some housekeeping things and we'll let you all go. But we really enjoyed hanging out with you guys for the past hour. Oops. Sorry, I thought I got rid of all these. We had some previous questions. We're just going to zoom all through these and get to our fun stuff, which is some resources for you guys. So no matter what year you are in school, if it's freshman, sophomore, junior, senior, or beyond, even med school, we have a ton of free resources for you in our book. We have ebooks, we've got personal statement books, we've got interview guides, we've got college list advice, tons of stuff. As you guys already know, we do webinars. We have some more that are going to be popping up. I think they're coming on the next slide. And then if you do want to get some more information from us, you can either subscribe to us at moonprep.com/blog, the latest college admissions medical school news, or we do send out texts. And so you text at MoonPrep to 81010. And so you can get some more information. I see someone's asking if we can do this like once a month. We do have webinars, usually twice a month. Even if it's not really, it's not an Ask Me Anything, we do have like a ton of other webinars, and we have Ask Me Anythings coming in November or December. We'll pitch the idea to see what the management says about doing this more often, because you guys had a ton of really great questions. And speaking of our webinars, here are some that are coming up. We have one on writing a personal statement, the crash course that I mentioned, as well as just some more BSMD specific examples on what to do. And the last thing, sorry, I know I'm zooming through it, but we would love for you to leave this webinar like learning and feeling more confident. And so we would love to hear your feedback. So you can do it by either liking this video or by subscribing to us. But we'd also really appreciate if you could leave us a review on our Facebook page or our Google page, whatever you kind of prefer. I can send you guys all the link right now to this, and we'd love to see a review. If you have any feedback on what we should improve, you can email that to me directly, please, because we would love to, improve and always get better. But thank you guys again so much for joining, and we'll see you all next time. Bye, everyone.